Welcome to Amy's Romance Stories. If you're new here, comment below where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join our growing family of Mafia romance story lovers. The doors to the Lake Como estate exploded open just as lightning split the sky above the Italian countryside. Rain hammered against marble floors, wind howling through the grand entrance like the scream of something long buried clawing its way back to life. Calliope's wineglass hovered at her lips, frozen mid-sip, as her eyes locked onto the figure standing in the doorway. He was soaked to the bone, dark hair plastered against a face she'd kissed 1,000 times in another lifetime. A jagged scar cut through his left eyebrow, new and violent, a reminder that the world had carved pieces from him just as his disappearance had carved pieces from her. His eyes, those storm-gray eyes that once looked at her like she was salvation itself, now burned with something between rage and desperation. Lysander Torino, dead for 2 years, standing in her dining room like death had simply changed its mind. The wineglass slipped from Calliope's fingers, crystal shattering against marble in a sound that seemed to wake everyone from their paralysis. Constantine rose slowly from his seat, 6 feet 3 inches of controlled fury, his hand sliding beneath his dinner jacket where she knew he kept his weapon. But his movements were careful, calculated, the kind of restraint that came from years of being the responsible brother, the one who cleaned up messes rather than creating them. Lysander's gaze never wavered from Calliope. He crossed the threshold, water dripping from his clothes, each footstep echoing in the cavernous room like a countdown to detonation. "Hello, wife," he said, and his voice was gravel and smoke, rough from disuse or screaming or perhaps from choking on all the words he'd swallowed for 2 years. Calliope felt her spine straighten, ice flooding her veins where once there had been fire. "I'm not your wife," she said, each word carved from glacier. "You died. I mourned you. I married your brother." The past tense felt like swallowing glass, but she forced it out anyway, forced herself to meet those eyes that had haunted every nightmare and every traitorous dream. Lysander moved closer, ignoring Constantine entirely as if his older brother were merely furniture, an obstacle to step around rather than a man who could end him with a single bullet. He stopped 3 feet from where Calliope sat, and even with that distance she could feel the heat radiating off him, could smell rain and something darker. Something that reminded her of hotel rooms in Rome and tangled sheets and promises whispered against skin. "Did you mourn me in his bed, Calliope?" he asked, and the question was a knife between her ribs. "Did you whisper my name when he touched you?" Her hand moved before her brain caught up, palm cracking against his cheek with enough force to snap his head to the side. The sound ricocheted through the room. Constantine's gun cleared his holster. 2 of the house guards moved toward them. But Lysander just smiled, slow and predatory, and caught her wrist before she could pull it back. His thumb found her pulse point, pressing just hard enough to feel her heartbeat betray her with its frantic rhythm. "There she is," he murmured, and something in his voice cracked like ice over deep water. "My little wildcat, I was afraid they'd tamed you." Constantine's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Let her go, brother. Whatever you think you're owed, you lost the right when you abandoned her." The gun was steady in his hand, pointed at the floor but ready, always ready. This was the Constantine she'd learned to love over 2 years of careful reconstruction. The man who'd found her shattered and piece by patient piece had helped her remember how to be whole. Lysander released her wrist but didn't step back. His attention finally shifted to Constantine, and Calliope watched something dangerous move behind his eyes. "You want to talk about abandonment," he said, his voice dropping to something lethal. "Let me tell you about the federal indictment that was going to put me away for 30 years. Let me tell you about the prosecutor who had photographs, recordings, enough evidence to dismantle this entire family brick by brick. Let me tell you about the choice between a cage and a grave, between sacrificing myself or watching everyone I loved burn. He turned back to Calliope, and she hated how her breath caught, hated the muscle memory that made her body lean toward him, even as her mind screamed to run. I faked my death to save this family, he said. The plan was 3 months. Stay dead long enough for the investigation to collapse, for the heat to die down, then come back. 3 months, Calliope. It took 2 years to make sure every thread was cut, every witness discredited, every door sealed shut. And in those 2 years, Constantine said quietly, you never sent word, never let her know you were breathing, never gave her a choice. Lysander's jaw clenched hard enough that Calliope could see the muscle jump beneath his skin. The communication lines were compromised, he said. Any contact would have exposed me, would have put a target on her back. I did what I had to do. Calliope stood slowly, her chair scraping against marble. Both men turned to her, and she felt the weight of their attention like hands on her skin. You were supposed to wait for me, Lysander said, and there it was, the crack in his armor, the break in his voice that made him sound 23 again, young and desperate and convinced she was the only good thing in his violent world. She stepped close, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, so close her next words would hit him point blank. I waited in my wedding dress for 3 days, Lysander. The dress your mother had made in Florence, the one with the lace from her own wedding gown stitched into the bodice. I didn't eat, didn't sleep. I sat in your apartment surrounded by the life we were supposed to start, and I waited. They found me on the floor, unconscious, still clutching the ring you'd given me, still believing you'd walk through that door and tell me it was all a mistake. She watched him flinch, watched the impact of her words hit him like bullets, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief. Just the vast, echoing emptiness that had lived in her chest for so long she'd learned to call it home. So don't you dare, she continued, her voice dropping to something sharp enough to cut. Tell me what I was supposed to do. Don't you dare stand there, dripping all over the floors I've walked for 2 years without you, and act like I'm the one who broke faith. Before you go, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with yourself. Are you really going to scroll past this story without subscribing? You'll forget the channel name, you'll lose this in your feed, and next week you'll be searching desperately trying to find part 2. Don't be that person. Hit subscribe. It takes 1 second and costs you nothing, but it means everything to me. The silence that followed was broken only by rain against windows and the distant rumble of thunder rolling across the lake. Lysander looked like she'd gutted him, like every word had been a blade, and he was bleeding out right there on her dining room floor. Constantine holstered his weapon but didn't relax, his body still coiled tight, ready to intervene if Lysander so much as breathed wrong. Then Lysander did something Calliope didn't expect. He pulled a folded paper from inside his jacket, water-stained and worn like it had been carried close to skin for a very long time. He held it out to her. Family law, he said. Article 47, Section 3. A Torino blood oath engagement can only be dissolved by death. Real death. Since I'm very much alive, our engagement still stands. Your marriage, he looked at Constantine with something between triumph and misery, is invalid. Constantine moved faster than she'd ever seen him move, closing the distance, getting in Lysander's face. You're going to invoke ancient law? He said, his voice dangerous and low. Yeah, you're going to use a technicality to destroy her life again. I'm using the truth, Lysander shot back. She was mine first. She'll be mine last. Calliope snatched the paper from Lysander's hand, scanning the archaic Italian, the legal phrasing that dated back 3 centuries when the Torino family was being built on blood and stolen wine. Her stomach dropped. He was right. The law was clear, antiquated and barbaric, but clear. Unless she wanted to fight this in front of the family council. unless she wanted to air every private pain in front of men who still thought women were assets to be managed. She was technically still engaged to a dead man who refused to stay buried. She looked up at both of them, these two men who'd shaped her life in such different ways, and felt something dangerous unfurl in her chest. "The family council will need to vote," she said. "If you want to invoke old law, Lysander, then we follow all of it. I have 7 days to choose my husband. A trial by family vote." Constantine's hand found hers, warm and steady and familiar. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "We can fight it. We can leave. Start over somewhere they can't touch us." But Calliope was looking at Lysander, watching the way hope and hunger warred across his face, and she thought about the girl she used to be, the one who would have run into his arms and damn the consequences. That girl was dead, and maybe it was time these men understood exactly what they'd created in her absence. "No," she said. "We do this properly. 7 days. May the best man win." Lysander's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "You still sleep on the left side of the bed?" he asked, and his voice dropped to something intimate and poisonous. "You still reach for someone in your sleep?" "I remember everything, Calliope. Every sound you make. Every place you like to be kissed. Every way you'd come apart under my hands. Let's see if he learned them as well as I know them." Constantine's hand tightened on hers, but Calliope didn't look away from Lysander, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her shake. "Get out," she said. "You've made your dramatic entrance. You've staked your claim. Now get out of my house before I have you thrown out." "Our house," Lysander corrected. "Under family law, I still have rights to this estate." But he was already moving toward the door, already turning to leave. "Sweet dreams, wife. I'll see you tomorrow. We have a lot of catching up to do." When the door closed behind him, Calliope's knees nearly gave out. Constantine caught her, arms coming around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you, amore. Just breathe." But breathing felt impossible with Lysander's words still hanging in the air, with the memory of his thumb on her wrist, with the terrible, traitorous warmth spreading through her body at his proximity. "What have I done?" she whispered. "You've given yourself 7 days to figure out what you really want," Constantine said. "And whatever you choose, I'll love you through it, even if you don't choose me." That's what he did, she realized. That's what made Constantine so dangerous in a completely different way than Lysander. Where Lysander demanded and took and burned, Constantine offered and gave and built. Where Lysander was wildfire, Constantine was the hearth that kept you warm through winter. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become her husband through tragedy and proximity and genuine affection. "I do love you," she said, because it was true and he deserved to hear it. "You need to know that. This isn't about loving you less." "I know," he said and kissed her forehead with devastating gentleness. "It's about loving him still. I've always known, Calliope. From the first time you said my name in your sleep, and it sounded like an apology." That night, Calliope lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Constantine slept beside her. She could feel the weight of the coming week pressing down on her chest, could feel the fault lines in her carefully reconstructed life beginning to crack. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. Against her better judgment, she opened the message. The library. "Tomorrow. Noon. We need to talk without an audience. Please." She should delete it. Should block the number. Should roll over and wake Constantine and tell him everything. Instead, she typed back a single word. "Fine." The response came immediately. "I never stopped loving you." Calliope deleted the conversation and set her phone face down, but sleep didn't come for hours. When it finally did, she dreamed of storm-gray eyes and promises made in the dark. of a white dress she'd never gotten to wear, and a man who'd chosen survival over staying. Morning arrived with weak sunlight struggling through clouds, the storm from the previous night leaving everything washed clean and dripping. Constantine made espresso in the kitchen, moving around the space with easy familiarity, and Calliope watched him and thought about the life they'd built. It was a good life, stable, safe. He'd been patient with her grief, understanding about her nightmares, gentle when she needed gentleness, and strong when she needed strength. "I have some business in Rome today," Constantine said, sliding a cup across the counter to her. "I'll be back by dinner." "Will you be all right here?" She should tell him. Should mention the message. Instead, she nodded and sipped her espresso and hated herself just a little. "I'll be fine." He kissed her before he left, slow and deep, a reminder of what they had, what she stood to lose. "Be careful," he murmured against her lips. "Lysander's unpredictable when he wants something. And he's always wanted you most when you're slipping away." The library was on the east side of the estate, in all dark wood and leather and books that hadn't been read in generations. It had been their place once, hers and Lysander's, back when sneaking away from family dinners felt thrilling instead of dangerous. She arrived at noon exactly, pushing open the heavy doors to find him already there, standing by the windows overlooking the lake. He'd cleaned up since last night, the beard trimmed close, the scar somehow making him more beautiful in a tragic, ruined sort of way. He turned when she entered, and the look on his face was so raw it almost stopped her heart. "You came," he said, like he'd genuinely doubted she would. "You said we needed to talk," Calliope replied, staying near the door, maintaining distance. "So talk." Lysander crossed to the desk, the same desk where 3 years ago he'd kissed her for the first time, where he'd laid her down and worshipped her with a reverence that made her feel like something holy instead of something traded between families for alliances and profit. He leaned against it, arms crossed, looking at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Tell me you don't still imagine my hands on you," he said. "Tell me when he kisses you, you don't wish it was me. Lie to me, Calliope. I'll know." She forced herself to stay still, to not react, to give him nothing. "You're so arrogant," she started, but he pushed off the desk and closed the distance between them in 3 strides, backing her against the bookshelf with the weight of his presence alone. He didn't touch her, didn't need to. The heat between them was enough. "Tell me you don't remember this," he said, his voice dropping low, intimate. I'm the tone he used to use in the dark when the rest of the world disappeared. "Tell me you don't still feel it. This thing between us that's bigger than sense, bigger than safety. You think you love him? Fine. Maybe you do. But what you feel for me, what I feel for you, that's not love. That's the kind of inevitability that ruins people." Her breath came faster, her pulse hammering in her throat where she knew he could see it. "That was a different girl," she managed. His eyes searched her face, looking for cracks in her armor. "Then, why are you gripping that bookshelf like you're remembering exactly what I did to you on this floor?" he asked, and his lips were so close to her ear she could feel the words against her skin. "Why is your chest heaving? Why haven't you moved away?" "Because I'm angry," she said, and shoved him back hard enough that he stumbled. "Because you don't get to waltz back into my life and act like you own me. Because I'm not some prize to be won by whoever says the prettiest words. Here's a question I want you to think about while our story continues. Are you Team Lysander or Team Constantine? Drop a comment and let me know, because trust me, you're going to want to remember which side you chose when you see what happens next." Lysander's expression shifted, something like respect mixing with the hunger. "There she is," he said again. "The woman who learned to bite back. Good. I don't want the girl I left behind. I want the woman you've become, even if she hates me, even if she never forgives me. At least that's real." Calliope felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "You don't get to do this," she said. "You don't get to make me feel this way." What way?" he pressed, and he was close again. Always so damn close. Alive? Angry? Like your skin's too tight and your heart's trying to claw its way out of your chest? Because that's how I've felt every second of every day for 2 years, Calliope. Knowing you were here, breathing, living, maybe falling in love with someone else, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it except survive long enough to get back to you. A sound escaped her throat, half sob, half laugh, entirely broken. And now you're back, and everything's a mess, and I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to want you and love him, and not lose myself in the middle of it. Then don't choose, Lysander said, and his hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. Just kiss me. Once. Let me feel you again. If you feel nothing, if it's dead between us, I'll walk away. I'll sign whatever papers Constantine wants. I'll let you go. It was a terrible idea. It was betrayal. It was the kind of mistake that would detonate her life. But Calliope found herself leaning in anyway, found her hands fisting in his shirt, found her mouth a breath away from his. "This doesn't mean anything," she whispered. "Liar," he whispered back, and closed the distance. The kiss was volcanic. 2 years of grief and rage and desperate longing poured into the connection, his hands in her hair, her nails digging into his shoulders through the fabric of his shirt. It was nothing like Constantine's careful passion, nothing like the gentle way her husband loved her. This was wildfire and destruction. This was the kind of kiss that left marks. That left ruins. That reminded her why loving Lysander had always felt like choosing beautiful catastrophe over boring safety. When they broke apart, both were shaking, both breathing hard. Calliope's lips felt swollen, her hair disheveled from his hands, and the look on Lysander's face was triumph and devastation combined. "Tell me you felt nothing," he said, voice wrecked. She stepped back, putting space between them, putting air between the fire they created. "I can't," she admitted, and hated herself for it. "God help me, I can't." "But that doesn't mean I choose you," she added quickly, watching hope flare and die in his eyes. "That means I'm confused. That means my body's a traitor. That means we have chemistry, Lysander, not a future." "Chemistry," he repeated and laughed darkly. "Is that what we're calling it now? Fine. Call it whatever lets you sleep at night. But we both know the truth. This," he gestured between them, "isn't over. It's never going to be over." Calliope left the library with her lips still tingling and her heart in chaos, and she didn't see Lysander for 2 days after that. He was giving her space or strategizing, or perhaps just letting the memory of that kiss do the work for him. But Constantine noticed the change in her immediately. That evening, when he returned from Rome, he took one look at her face, and his expression shuttered closed like a door slamming shut. "You saw him," he said. It wasn't a question. She could have lied, should have lied. But something about the way Constantine stood there, jacket slung over one shoulder, tie loosened, looking at her with eyes that had seen every version of her broken and loved her anyway, I made the deception stick in her throat. "Yes," she said simply. He nodded once, jaw tight, and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. "Did you kiss him?" he asked the glass instead of her. The silence was answer enough. Constantine tossed back the drink, set the glass down with careful precision, and turned to face her fully. "I'm not going to ask if it meant something," he said quietly, "because I already know it did. The question is whether it meant more than what we have." "I don't know," Calliope whispered, and hated how small her voice sounded. "I don't know anything anymore, Constantine. 2 days ago, my life made sense. Now I feel like I'm standing on ground that's crumbling beneath me, and I don't know which way to jump." He crossed to her then. cupped her face in his hands with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "Then don't jump yet," he said. "You have 5 days left. Take them. Figure out what you need. Just promise me one thing. Anything," she said, meaning it. "Promise me that whatever you choose, you'll choose it because it's what you actually want. Not because you feel guilty or obligated or because you're trying to fix something that was broken before you ever had a chance to hold it together." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I can survive losing you, Calliope. What I can't survive is keeping you when half your heart is somewhere else." She kissed him then, soft and salt-sweet with tears she didn't remember shedding, and he held her like she was already slipping away. The next morning, a woman arrived at the estate in a black car with tinted windows and enough confidence that the guards let her through without question. Calliope was having coffee on the terrace when one of the house staff announced the visitor. Saraphene Lascaris, here to see the family. The name meant nothing to Calliope, but she watched Lysander's face go carefully blank when Saraphene walked into the morning room, and that told her everything. This woman was dangerous. Beautiful in that sharp-edged way that came from years of using her looks as weapons, dark hair swept into a chignon, wearing a cream suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Seraphine's smile was a blade wrapped in silk. "Lysander, darling, so good to see you alive. You really should have stayed in touch. And you must be Calliope." She extended a hand. "I've heard so much about you." Calliope didn't take the offered hand. "Who are you?" she asked bluntly. "Someone with information you're going to want to hear." "I," Saraphene said, unbothered by the slight. "Information about why Lysander really disappeared, about who wanted him gone, about the lies you've been living for 2 years." Constantine appeared in the doorway, and something passed between him and Saraphene, something that made Calliope's stomach drop. "You know her," she said to her husband. "Don't you?" "We've met," Constantine said tightly. "Once. A long time ago." Saraphene laughed, bright and poisonous. "Oh, more than once, Constantine. Don't be modest." She turned to address the room, playing to an audience. The federal indictment that sent Lysander running? It was fake. Fabricated. Very expensive to put together. Very convincing, but entirely fictional. Lysander went white. "That's not possible," he said. "I saw the evidence, the case files, the prosecutor's notes." "You saw what you were meant to see," Saraphene replied. "What I was paid very handsomely to create. The question is, who paid me? Who wanted you out of Italy badly enough to orchestrate your death?" The silence in the room was suffocating. Calliope looked between Saraphene's satisfied smirk, Lysander's dawning horror, and Constantine's carefully controlled expression. "No," she heard herself say. "No, don't you dare." Saraphene pulled an envelope from her purse, slid it across the table toward Calliope. Bank transfers, emails, meeting records, all dated 3 weeks before Lysander's disappearance, all bearing Constantine's signature. Lysander moved so fast Calliope barely saw it, slamming Constantine against the wall hard enough to rattle the paintings. "You did this," he snarled. "You sent me away. You stole 2 years of my life." To Calliope's shock, Constantine didn't fight back. He just met his brother's eyes and said, "Yes, I did." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Calliope couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't reconcile the man who'd held her so gently last night with the one who'd just admitted to destroying lives with premeditation. "Why?" she managed. "Constantine, why would you do that?" He looked at her then, and she saw everything in his face, every card he'd been holding close finely laid out. "Because I've been in love with you since the day my father introduced us," he said. "Since before Lysander ever noticed you were more than just a strategic alliance. I've loved you quietly, desperately, pathetically for years. And watching you fall in love with him, watching you light up when he walked into a room, watching you plan a life that would never include me. It broke something in me. Lysander's grip on his brother's collar tightened. So you took her from me. I gave myself a chance, Constantine corrected. I didn't force her to marry me, Lysander. I didn't manipulate her feelings. He swallowed hard. I removed you from the equation and let her see me. Really see me. And she chose to love me on her own. Calliope felt like she was watching this scene from underwater. Everything distorted and slow. You built our entire marriage on a lie, she said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Every moment, every touch, every time you told me you loved me, it was all built on a foundation of you destroying him. No, Constantine said desperately, finally pushing away from Lysander to face her. The foundation was a lie, I won't deny that. But what we built together, Calliope, that was real. Every moment I comforted you, every time I made you laugh, every night I held you when the nightmares came, that wasn't strategy. That was me loving you the only way I knew how. Get out, she said quietly. Calliope, please, Constantine started. Get out, she screamed, and something shattered. Maybe a vase or maybe just the careful control she'd been maintaining. Both of you, get out. I can't look at either of you right now without wanting to burn this entire place to the ground. Lysander opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off. Don't you dare try to comfort me or claim some kind of victory here. You're both poison, you're both selfish, and I was an idiot to think either of you actually cared about what I wanted. They left, Lysander throwing one last venomous look at his brother. Constantine moving like a man walking to his own execution. Saraphene lingered, watching Calliope with something like satisfaction. This wasn't about helping me, Calliope said once they were alone. You didn't expose Constantine out of the goodness of your heart. What do you want? Smart girl? Saraphene said approvingly. I want you to disappear. Take what's yours and walk away from the Torino family. Leave both brothers to tear each other apart. And why would I do that? Calliope asked, even as her mind raced ahead, already planning escape routes. Because you're not like them, Saraphene said. You're better than this world, better than their games. And because, she paused, there's something they don't know, something you've been hiding. Your son. The world tilted. Calliope's hand shot out, gripping the edge of the table to keep from falling. How? She started. But Saraphene was already pulling out more papers, these ones showing bank transfers from Constantine to a convent outside Florence, medical records, photographs of a dark-haired little boy with storm-gray eyes. Cassian, Saraphene said softly, 3 years old, hidden away by Constantine to protect him from the family, from rivals, from everyone who might use an heir as leverage. Does Lysander know he's a father? Calliope's vision swam. The pregnancy had been traumatic, the birth worse, complications that left her with gaps in her memory, months where everything blurred together. Constantine had helped her place the baby somewhere safe, had visited him regularly, had protected that secret with the same intensity he'd protected her. No, she whispered. No one knows except Constantine and the sisters at the convent. Well, Saraphene smiled. Now I know. And unless you want that information to spread to every rival family in Italy, every enemy who'd love to get their hands on Torino blood, you'll meet me tomorrow. Alone. I'll give you new identities, passage out of the country, enough money to start over. All you have to do is walk away. After Saraphene left, Calliope stood on the terrace and called the number she'd memorized 3 years ago, the emergency line that only she and Constantine knew. Sister Maria answered on the second ring. Bring him home, Calliope said. Tomorrow. It's time. That night she told neither brother where she was going. She took Constantine's car and drove through darkness to the convent, her hands shaking on the wheel. Sister Maria met her at the gate, and there he was. 3 years old, dark curls and serious eyes, clutching a stuffed rabbit. He looked at her with recognition that broke her heart. This child she'd only been able to visit once a month. This piece of herself she'd hidden away to keep safe. "Mama," he said shyly, and Calliope fell to her knees and pulled him close, breathing in the smell of him, soap and innocence and everything good she'd somehow created despite the darkness. "Before you find out what happens next, I need you to do something for me. And I'm not asking as a creator to a viewer. I'm asking as someone who pours hours into these stories for you. Subscribe. Right now. Because if you care enough about Calliope and Cassian to keep reading, if you're invested enough to want to know how this ends, then you care enough to click one button. Don't be the person who consumes and never commits. Subscribe, please." She spent the night at the convent, holding Cassian while he slept, memorizing the weight of him, the sound of his breathing. Sister Maria sat with her in the small room. "Constantine is a good man," the nun said quietly. "Whatever else he's done, he's loved that boy like his own. He's been here every week, reading stories, bringing toys, making sure Cassian knows he's wanted." "That makes it worse," Calliope whispered. "It would be easier if he were a monster. But he's not. He's just a man who made terrible choices because he loved me, and I don't know how to forgive that." In the morning, she drove back to Lake Como with Cassian asleep in the back seat, and she didn't go to meet Saraphene. Instead, she went to the estate, walked into the family meeting room where both brothers sat on opposite sides like enemies at a negotiation. They both stood when they saw her, then froze when they saw the child in her arms. Lysander's face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds. "Calliope," he said carefully. "Who is that?" "This is Cassian," she said. "Your son. Our son. Conceived the week before you died. Born 8 months after I married Constantine. Hidden away for 3 years because I couldn't trust this family not to turn him into a weapon." She watched Lysander shatter, watched him take a step forward, then stop like he didn't have permission to come closer. "I have a son," he said, and his voice cracked. "You were pregnant. You gave birth. You've been raising our child, and I never knew." "I barely knew," Calliope said honestly. "The trauma, the grief, it caused complications. I don't remember most of the pregnancy. I don't remember the birth. I just remember waking up in a hospital with Constantine holding my hand, telling me our baby was alive but fragile, that he needed to be somewhere safe. And I trusted him." Constantine, who'd been silent until now, spoke quietly. "I've been caring for him, visiting him, making sure he had everything he needed. I did it knowing he was Lysander's blood. I did it because he's yours, Calliope, and I love everything that's yours." Lysander turned on his brother with murder in his eyes. "You kept my son from me," he said, dangerously quiet. "You already took 2 years of my life, and you took 3 years of his. You robbed me of watching him grow, of being there for his first words, his first steps." "I protected him," Constantine shot back. "From the indictments, from the rival families, from the chaos of your return. What would you have done? Lysander? Dragged a newborn into hiding with you? Put a target on his back?" The fight that followed was brutal, vicious, both brothers finally unleashing years of resentment. Calliope put Cassian down in the corner with his rabbit and stepped between them, firing a paperweight at the wall with enough force that it shattered. Both men froze. "Enough," she said, and her voice carried authority she didn't know she possessed. "I am not a prize to be won. Cassian is not a weapon to wield against each other. And I am done. Do you hear me? Done with both of you, treating my life like a chess game where you're the only players that matter." She took a breath, looked at both of them, these men she'd loved in such different ways. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm taking Cassian. and I'm leaving. I have a villa in Positano, 'cause small and quiet and far from this family's reach. If either of you want to be in our lives, you'll have to earn it. No more possessiveness, no more games. You'll have to prove you can put him first, put me first, put something other than your own wants first. Lysander's face was anguished. Calliope, let me meet him, please. I'll do anything but don't take him away before I've even held him. Then prove it, she said. Both of you. Prove you've changed. The door burst open. Saraphene stood there with 2 armed men, and her expression was cold fury. You were supposed to meet me, she said to Calliope. You were supposed to take my deal. Now I have to take what I want by force. She gestured to Cassian. The boy comes with me. Torino blood is worth a fortune to the right buyers. And you 3 get to live with knowing you destroyed each other so thoroughly that you couldn't even protect one child. Everything happened at once. Lysander went for his gun. Constantine threw himself toward Cassian. Calliope screamed. But then something unexpected occurred. The brothers moved in perfect synchronization, years of training and blood memory taking over. Lysander shot one of Saraphene's men while Constantine took down the other. They moved like they'd choreographed it, covering each other's blind spots, anticipating each other's moves. Saraphene had her own weapon out, pointed at Calliope. You've ruined everything, she hissed. Do you know how long I've been planning this? How much money I invested in tearing this family apart? Why? Calliope asked, even as she slowly moved toward where Cassian crouched, terrified. Why go through all this? Because the Torino family destroyed mine, Saraphene said. Your father-in-law, the great Don Theron, he killed my father over a territory dispute when I was Cassian's age, left me with nothing. I've spent my whole life building toward this moment, toward watching his sons destroy each other over a woman. It was supposed to be perfect. It was Constantine who made the connection first. Lascaris, he said slowly. Your father was Dmitri Lascaris, the arms dealer. Who your father executed in front of his family, Saraphene finished. So yes, this is personal. This is revenge. And it's not over. Actually, Lysander said quietly, it is. Because you made one critical mistake. You assumed we'd stay broken. You assumed we'd choose our rivalry over protecting what matters. He looked at Constantine. His brother nodded. And together they moved, disarming Saraphene with a coordinated efficiency that spoke of years fighting side by side before their rift. She hit the ground hard, weapon skittering away, and suddenly it was over. The authorities came. Statements were given. Saraphene was taken away screaming about justice and revenge. And through it all, Calliope held Cassian, whispering that he was safe, that everything was okay, even though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. When the house was finally quiet again, the 3 of them sat in the library, Cassian asleep against Calliope's shoulder. Lysander sat across from them, drinking in the sight of his son with desperate hunger. Can I? He started, then stopped. Can I hold him? He tried again. Please, just for a moment. Calliope looked at Constantine, who nodded. She carefully transferred the sleeping child to Lysander's arms and watched the exact moment her ex-fiancé fell completely, irrevocably in love. Lysander's hand was shaking as he touched Cassian's hair. His face, like he couldn't quite believe he was real. He has your eyes, Lysander said, his voice thick. And your nose. He's perfect. The words failed, and he just held his son and cried silently. Constantine stood. I'll give you some time, he said quietly. Take as long as you need. He paused at the door. I meant what I said, Calliope. Whatever you choose, I'll support it, even if it means stepping back, even if it means watching you build a life with him. You deserve to be happy. After he left, Lysander looked up at her. I don't deserve this, he said. I don't deserve to hold him, to know him. I've missed so much. You have. Calliope agreed. And I can't give you those years back. But, she took a breath, you can be there for the years ahead. If you mean what you said, if you can really change. I'll do anything, Lysander said. Anything, Calliope. Just don't shut me out. Let me be his father, even if I can never be your husband again. Here's what I need to know from you, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments because this matters for where stories like this go next. Would you rather see Calliope choose one brother definitively, or do you prefer the ambiguous ending where she chooses herself and leaves the door open? Tell me what satisfies you more as a reader, because I genuinely want to know. The days that followed were strange, tentative, like learning to walk on ground that had recently been a battlefield. Calliope packed her things, packed Cassian's few belongings from the convent, and prepared to leave for Positano. Both brothers helped, circling each other warily but without the open hostility that had defined them before. On her last night at the estate, she found them on the terrace talking quietly. She hung back, listening. I'm sorry, Lysander was saying, for hating you, for wanting to destroy you. You were just, he paused. You were just fighting for what you wanted the same way I would have, the same way I did. I'm sorry too, Constantine replied. For the years I took from you, for the lie I built. I've told myself it was love, that love justified it, but it didn't. It doesn't. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Lysander said, He calls you Papa Cons, doesn't he? Cassian, I heard him say it this morning. Constantine's voice was careful. I never asked him to. But yes, I've been. He cleared his throat. I've been in his life since he was born. I know that must kill you. It does, Lysander admitted. But it also, he struggled for words. It also means he wasn't alone. It means someone loved him even when I couldn't. So, thank you. For loving my son when I couldn't be there. Calliope chose that moment to step onto the terrace. Both men stood, and she saw them clearly for the first time in days, not as the monsters they'd seemed or the gods she'd once thought them, but just as men. Flawed, broken, trying. I'm leaving in the morning, she said. The villa is ready. Cassian and I are going to build a life there, something quiet and normal and safe. You're both welcome to visit. You're both welcome to be part of his life. But, she looked at each of them. You'll have to do it on my terms. No fighting, no competing, no using him as a pawn in whatever complicated relationship the three of us have. We understand, they said in unison, then looked at each other and almost smiled. That night, Calliope dreamed of the life she'd left behind and the life waiting ahead. And for the first time in years, the dreams weren't nightmares. 6 months later, Positano was everything she'd hoped it would be. The villa sat on a cliff overlooking the sea, small but beautiful, with a garden where Cassian could play safely. She'd started painting again, something she'd given up years ago, and the local gallery had started selling her work. Life was simple. Life was good. Both brothers came to visit, separately at first, then gradually, tentatively, sometimes together. Lysander arrived every other weekend, to bringing gifts and stories and desperate love. He read to Cassian for hours, taught him Italian children's songs, fell asleep with his son in his arms like he was afraid he'd disappear if he let go. Constantine had stepped back from the family business entirely, started a legitimate security firm. He called every night to say goodnight to Cassian, sent art supplies and books, and when he visited, he and Lysander maintained a careful peace. On a warm evening in September, both brothers arrived at the same time. There was a moment of awkwardness. Then Cassian ran out yelling Papa Lys and Papa Cons and threw himself at both of them with equal enthusiasm. They caught him together, and Calliope watched from the doorway as her son laughed between the two men who loved him. Later, after Cassian was asleep, the three of them sat on the terrace under stars that seemed close enough to touch. "We need to talk," Lysander said. "The three of us." Constantine nodded agreement. "This," he gestured between them, "whatever this is, it can't stay undefined forever." "Calliope deserves clarity. So do both of you," Calliope said. "And here's what I know. I'm not ready to marry anyone. Maybe I never will be. What we have now, this strange, unconventional family, it works. Cassian is happy. I'm happy. You're both," she paused, "learning to be better versions of yourselves." "But," Lysander started. "No buts," she interrupted. "I won't choose between you because choosing implies one of you wins and one loses, and Cassian loses someone he loves. Instead, I'm choosing this. This mess, this complication, this family we're building that doesn't look like anyone else's family." Constantine leaned forward. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you're both in our lives," Calliope said. "It means I care about both of you in different ways. It means maybe someday I'll figure out what I want romantically, or maybe I won't. But right now, I choose me. I choose my son. I choose the life we're building. And if you can accept that, if you can be patient and let this evolve naturally instead of forcing it, then you're welcome to stay." "I can do that," Lysander said immediately. "As long as I get to be in your lives, I can do anything." Constantine was quiet longer, then nodded. "Okay. Okay, we do this your way. No pressure, no demands. Just," he looked at her with those steady eyes, "just don't shut us out. Let us prove we can be what you need." Over the following months, something remarkable happened. The brothers slowly, yet painfully, began to rebuild their relationship. Not what it was before, but something new. Something forged in the fire of almost losing everything. They learned to co-parent Cassian, to share holidays, to sit at the same table without tension crackling between them. And Calliope learned that healing wasn't linear, that forgiveness was a process, not a destination, that maybe happy endings didn't have to look like fairy tales to be real. 1 year after leaving Lake Como, she woke to find both brothers in her kitchen making breakfast while Cassian directed them like a tiny conductor. They were arguing about scrambled versus fried eggs, but it was playful, warm, nothing like the violence that had once defined them. She stood in the doorway watching, and Lysander caught her eye. He smiled, soft and genuine, no desperation or hunger, just contentment. "Morning, Bella," he said. "We made coffee." "And burn the toast," Constantine added. "But Cassian says that's how he likes it now, so we're calling it a win." Cassian spotted her and launched into a detailed account of his plans for the day, and she listened with one ear while her heart felt too big for her chest. This, she thought, this strange, imperfect, unconventional love. This was enough. Later, when Cassian was at the beach with Constantine building sandcastles, Lysander found Calliope in her studio. She was working on a painting, all blues and golds, abstract but emotional. "It's beautiful," he said. "Like you." She set down her brush. "Lysander, if you're about to make this complicated again, I swear I will throw you out." He laughed. "No, I promise. He stepped closer, carefully, always so careful now. "I wanted to say thank you for letting me be his father, for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it. Maybe none of us deserve the grace we're given," Calliope said. "Maybe we just have to be grateful for it and try to be worthy of it going forward." He kissed her forehead, feather light, asking nothing. "I love you," he said. "I probably always will. But I'm learning that love doesn't have to be possession. It can just be, wanting you to be happy. Even if that happiness doesn't include me the way I once wanted." That evening, all four of them watched the sunset from the terrace, Cassian chattering between adults who'd learned to love him more than they hated each other. Calliope wore 2 rings on a chain around her neck now, the engagement ring from Lysander and the wedding band from Constantine, both over her heart, but not on her finger. A reminder of the past, a promise to the future, a symbol of the complicated truth that some loves don't fit into neat categories. As the sun painted the sky in impossible colors, Calliope thought about the girl she'd been, the one who'd waited in a wedding dress for a man who never came. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd learned that strength sometimes looked like softness, that boundaries were acts of love, that choosing yourself wasn't selfish but necessary. She looked at Lysander, still beautiful in that damaged way, catching Cassian as he jumped off the terrace wall. She looked at Constantine, steady and patient as he'd always been, pointing out boats on the horizon. And she looked at her son, her miracle, laughing in the golden light. They say a ghost bride is cursed to wander between worlds, never fully alive, never fully at rest. But Calliope had learned something the curse never mentioned. Sometimes the space between is where you stop wandering and start living. Sometimes the in-between is exactly where you're meant to be. And if that's not a traditional ending, if there's no final choice or clear resolution, well, love rarely fits into the shapes we're told it should take. Sometimes it sprawls and complicates and refuses to be defined. Sometimes it looks like 2 men learning to share instead of conquer. Like a woman claiming her autonomy in a world built on ownership. Like a child with 2 fathers and a mother who chose herself first so she could love them all better. Sometimes. Calliope thought as Cassian climbed into her lap, and both brothers smiled at her like she was the sun. Sometimes the unconventional ending is the only honest one. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If this story moved you, if you felt every complicated emotion alongside Calliope, Lysander, and Constantine, if you're sitting there thinking about love and choice and what it means to choose yourself, then do me one favor. Share this story. Send it to someone who needs to hear that unconventional can be beautiful, that choosing yourself isn't giving up on love, that some endings don't tie up neat because life isn't neat. And subscribe for more stories that challenge what romance looks like. Because we're just getting started.